Well, we're here for talking about the most exciting thing on the planet, insurance.
Yeah.
As as I'm sure you guys all agree, guys and gals. My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm the executive director of the River Management Society, and we might see a few more people coming in as the time goes on. But well, I have here two folks who can tell you everything you need to know about insurance and your organization, Beth Spilman and Michael Hodge. And we'll mention who they are again in a second. But thanks again for showing up. So just a little bit about the River Management Society, if you are not familiar. We're a national organization. We do many kind of meetups like this during the course of the year. Our river management roundtables are free and they happen every second Tuesday or almost every second Tuesday. Sometimes we'll change it a little bit. Um, and the topics are all about river management or experiences. Some are more like nuts and bolts, like permits and use and crowding, and then some are more about the environment that you work in. It might be working with an intergenerational workplace. It might be inviting new people into your organization and so forth. So you're always welcome, second Tuesdays. And we are a membership organization. You can join as an individual or as an organization with two people or four people or eight people. And there are a bunch of um, member benefits that you can find out all about. Before we begin, I think that the number of people that we will have will not be so many that you can't just, it won't be difficult to just raise your hand and then we'll call on you. Um, if if it looks like not very many people are raising their hand, we'll just say, unmute yourself, please. And then we'll now get started. So welcome again. Um, the two folks that we have here are Beth Spilman, who's the executive director of the American Canoe Association. Thank you, Beth, for joining us today from Fredericksburg, Virginia. And Mike Hodge from Hodge, Hart and Schleifer, whose company has been selling insurance since 1928. Did I get that right? Quite a
Right.
while. Mike hasn't been here since then, but his family or the company has been. So both have a long history of managing insurance. Also, Beth's background is insurance. So these guys know what they're talking about, and they also know river sports and the paddling community. So um, I'm gonna hand it over to Beth. And if you have a question that's like a burning question, raise your hand while she's speaking. If you just have like something for us to bring up when there's time at the end, put it in the chat. I think that'd be like if there's something like you can't hear or you can't, something's goofy with the technology, raise your hand. Otherwise, in the chat, please. And it would be awesome if you could put in the chat now who you are and where you're from. If you have a specific type interest, like this is why I'm attending, put that in the chat too. It might give us a little bit more food for thought later. So go ahead, Beth.
Thank you. And Risa, thank you so much for having me and the ACA here. Wanted to also introduce Crystal Pastel. Crystal, you can give a little wave. Crystal's our insurance coordinator. So she will also be available for questions if anyone has any. So I think, Risa, if you want to skip maybe two slides.
Okay.
Um, I think most of you are probably familiar with the ACA. I see some familiar faces out there. Hey, Mark. Hey, Kelly, who have longtime members of the ACA. But we are, we've been around since 1880. We certify paddling instructors. We're the national governing body for paddle sports. And we also have a large network of clubs and organizational members. Our mission really is to engage millions of paddlers with safe and healthy opportunities for challenge, learning, service, and enjoyment. And again, our organizational members, including paddling clubs and what we call affiliate organizations, are a critical part of our ability to achieve our mission. So next slide, please. For insurance purposes, we really have two organizational. Sorry, I'm one of those that has the crud that can't get rid of it. Um, we really have two types of organizational members. One are our Paddle America clubs, and the other are affiliate organizations. And I think the starkest distinction between these two membership or organizational types is that Paddle America clubs have members, whereas affiliate organizations tend to be event organizers who don't actually have members. So I think that's the easiest way to think about it. Um, for the purposes of River Management Society and a lot of you on the call, a watershed organization or water cleanup organization could actually be either a Paddle America club or an affiliate. And again, the distinction there is, does the watershed have members, or is it just an event organizing sort of organization? But we can help. I mean, Crystal answers questions about this all day, every day. And so we're happy to help you figure out which sort of category you best fit in. Next slide. Just briefly, public service announcement. Why join the ACA? There are lots of different reasons, but one is certainly that we help to build a paddling and water-based community throughout the U.S. as well as the world. And for the purposes of this call, we have an excellent insurance program that can be used for on-water activities for all different types of organizations. We had a call yesterday, and Michael and I and Risa were talking about how, a lot of organizations are able to get insurance coverage for festivals and off-water events, but sometimes it's more difficult to find insurance for on-water events. And I think that's really where we have quite the niche, because our insurance is focused on water activities. The next slide, please, Risa. So if you are interested in joining the ACA, either as a PAC or as an affiliate organization, we do provide risk management assistance. We ask that we have some risk management guidelines that we've developed over the past, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years. And so we ask that you read those risk management guidelines and sign that document. So I'm so sorry. And that document really is for, I would say, it addresses standard paddling situations, but we are also available to help if you have a more unique or a specific set of conditions related to your own waterway or the waterway that you tend to spend time on, and that you might need help with risk management, more specific, tailored risk management practices for that situation. So our risk management guidelines help with event planning, venue selection, safety measures, group management guidelines, and then also talks about the insurance coverage that we provide and what record keeping and reporting we request. Next slide. So just briefly to touch on some of our risk management requirements, certainly we are extremely strong advocates of life jacket wear. I'm not sure anyone would be surprised by that. We also think it's important to understand your participants' physical abilities and skills. We prohibit drug and alcohol use during any of our insured activities. We will not cover situations where people are traveling alone. Paddling alone. Two is the minimum, and we strongly recommend that at least 3 people paddle together. And then we also have a separate set of guidelines for large events, which I'm not sure any of that would apply to any of you. But this would be events that have lots of spectators, It may be in a little bit more of a remote area, and we would help work through a safety plan for that specific location. Now, one of the questions that has come up from time to time from our, um, I would say, river cleanup groups is, look, I'm going to be wading in 2 feet of water. Do I really have to wear a life jacket? They're hot. I don't want to wear them. I can see Crystal smiling. We always strongly recommend life jacket wear. But if there is a particular situation where it's an extremely onerous to wear a life jacket and someone is in very safe conditions, we can, make an exception on a case-by-case basis to our rule about life jacket wear. But we strongly recommend you always wear a life jacket. So what sort of insurance do we provide? Lisa, if we could go to the next slide. We provide $4 million of general liability and excess liability coverage. And I think one easy way to think about general liability coverage, because that's words that probably don't mean a lot to most of you, is negligence insurance. That's the way I like to think of it. If someone is negligent and it causes someone else to get hurt or to have damage to their property, then that's where general liability insurance coverage kicks in. Um, and so last year, when we started to hear from more and more waterway cleanup groups, there was about getting insurance from us. We realized that it didn't exactly fit, these organizations didn't exactly fit into our sort of primary group of organizations. So just to make sure there was no ambiguity at all, we worked with our insurance carrier this year to be more explicitly state that our insurance coverage would provide coverage during a waterway cleanup. So the cleanup might not involve a paddlecraft. Again, it might involve a john boat that you're dragging through a creek and you're throwing the trash in the john boat. Our insurance program would provide coverage for situations like that. The other thing we hear a lot is people asking about if they're doing volunteer work, or their organization is doing work in a state park or a national forest or a national park or land that's owned by someone else. We often hear that the property owner wants to be sure that they would be covered if something happened during the event on their land or in their water. And so that's where this concept of an additional insured comes in. And basically I'm sorry, Reese, it's the next slide. I apologize. What an additional insured certificate does is it extends our insurance coverage beyond the named insured, which would be your organization or you, to a third party. So if it's, again, an example of a national park or a national forest, if you're doing work on that land, we would provide an additional insured certificate, which would say not only is the Little River watershed coverage, so is the national park, state park, or whoever the property owner is. So that's what additional insured is. The next slide is actually pretty dense, and I'm not really going to go into any of this because you all would be bored. But we will make this presentation available, and all of this information is also available on our website. And this just goes into a little bit more detail about the cost of membership and some of the processes around getting insurance. Crystal is one of the more patient people on the planet Earth, and she loves talking to our members. And so you're also welcome to call and talk to Crystal. Look at that smiling face. She's available to help answer any of your insurance related questions. And Crystal's been with us for, Crystal, 4 years, 3 years?
It was actually 5 in January.
5 years. Oh my goodness. So I won't say that she's heard everything because I'm
Oh,
sure somebody on this call could come up with something she hasn't heard, but she has heard almost everything and is more than willing to help. Let's see. There's also more information, excuse me, available on our website. Risa, if you wouldn't mind, the next slide, please. We have a place where we have all of our frequently asked questions. And again, this is right on our website. And this is a compilation of the most common questions that we have gotten over the past few years. But again, Crystal is always happy to help. And she, as you can tell, is not a bot. She is a real person. And my last slide actually has a little bit more information about how to get in touch with us. A lot of you, if you've ever called the ACA, you've probably talked to Michelle Flynn. Michelle is sort of our first line of defense in answering phones. And she also is very helpful and knows a lot about this stuff. So that is all I have to say. I think Michael was going to say a few words and then we would open up for questions. Is that right, Risa?
questions and
Mike, you want to just toss in any thoughts that you've had in addition to what Beth has shared? And then we'll go into the questions. There are lots of questions, so this will be good.
yeah. So I'm here mainly to help people think through insurance and risk management considerations that are falling outside of what the ACA can provide. I've been kayaking and been in the insurance business for 25 plus years, and I've worked with a number of different, both for-profit river-related entities and a number of nonprofit entities. And so while I think the ACA program seems to be the most applicable and definitely affordable option for most like organizations like direct water river related activities. There does seem to be some questions that we get that Reese is getting for exposures or activities that might fall outside of what is provided by the ACA, or sometimes it's just that it's so impromptu or kind of random that the organizations don't get around to, or it's difficult to go through the process of getting coverage through the ACA. So I'm just here to help kind of think through some of those things. I do have a two or three questions that have come up over the last couple of weeks since we started talking about this, but we're really just open up to questions and see where I can help.
Yeah, okay. And I am remiss in just not sharing that this is your firm, this is Mike's company. He's here in the DMV. And does this sound like what you do, Mike?
Yeah, so this is like, and again, this is your time, so open it up for questions, but some things that have come up as off-water activities. So, as Beth was saying, it's primarily, the ACA program is for on-water activities. And I think, Beth, correct me, yesterday we were talking about if it's some off-water activity that is related to the on-water activity, they probably can fit it in. If it's completely non-water related, then that becomes another issue. Now, these festivals and things like that, there are event type coverages, but I think where these questions have come up have been, really related to where the activity is not core to the mission or the core operations of the entity. So we do river conservation and advocacy type work, but every once in a while we want to do a cleanup. Well, the ACA program comes into play there, but if it's something that's not water related, well, how do we look at that from a liability standpoint and insurance? And there's not an easy answer. I mean, there's usually an insurance product for everything, but if it's something that's completely unrelated to your normal activities, then the cost of it might not be something that, might be outside of what makes sense for a small organization. But
Mhm.
it is a problem that can be solved. It's just whether or not the costs make sense. Um,
Yeah.
Volunteer exposures. So this one's come up quite a bit. And it has, it's sort of two components, one liability for the volunteers. So there is coverage within the ACA program for that. And outside of it, most general liability policies do include volunteers as insureds or as employees. So then it goes back to, well, are we buying insurance for the activity, for that particular activity? So for normal activities that are within your normal scope of operations, of course, or, assuming you're buying that coverage. Activities that are sort of peripheral to what you're normally doing, you do need to make sure that your policies include those activities. And in that case, there would be coverage for volunteers. And when we were chatting yesterday, Beth pointed out that there is an act or a Volunteer Protections Act that does give the volunteers some immunity. So they are protected there, but they're not necessarily protected against having to defend a suit. And so it is commonplace that the general liability policy does cover them. So where this gets tricky is when you flip it over to, well, what about liability for the organization or the entity because a volunteer gets injured? And because the general liability policies view volunteers as employees, they also exclude injuries to employees because that's a statutory coverage covered by workers' compensation. So there is no coverage that protects an organization or entity from a suit from a volunteer because that volunteer was injured. For an employee, we look to workers' compensation, but in most states, volunteers aren't covered by workers' compensation. So we get this circular thing where there is no coverage. You can buy, there are endorsements to work to add volunteers, but they're clunky and they require a lot of tracking volunteers, making sure you know how much they're working, listing them by name. So that is possible depending on how organized the volunteer program is. But again, can be cumbersome. So for some organizations, some of our nonprofit clients, what we've done is buy accident policies that provide some coverage for volunteers, like a death benefit or an accident benefit or some limited income replacement. And it doesn't eliminate exposure, but what it does is hopefully minimize the chance that a volunteer would want to sue an organization that they were volunteering for.
Mhm.
So those are the questions that have come up so far, but if there are others,
Mhm.
happy to work through them.
Okay, before I'm going to call on Mark, 'cause he's being patient and has his hands up. Then we'll go to the chat. But also, I was remiss in not mentioning at the outset, this came up for RMS last year when a lot of partners for a lot of like friends groups, watershed groups who partner with and work closely with a federal agency more than state agencies were inquiring about coverage when they were offering to help the local whatever Forest Service or Park Service who didn't have the employees that they normally would during the course of the year. So like, well, we would like to help them do their river rangering. And they asked us if we were covered, and we don't know. Questions like that came up, and I certainly didn't know how to advise them, so I asked these guys to help out. Mark, let's see what you're thinking, please.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Mark from Rhode Island. I've got two questions. One for Michael Hodge and one for Crystal. So the question for Michael is this. I'm working with an outfitter who I'm trying to explain the pros and cons of membership in ACA as an outfitter and the insurance coverage that they have. And I currently have the outfitter has a existing insurance company that working with an agent. And I'm wondering how, just to try and succinctly differentiate between the insurance benefits that are offered through the ACA plan um, versus the insurance benefits and coverage that they are currently realizing through their existing provider, which is more of a general liability type of insurer. So in other words, it's not a specialty insurance line, unique to paddling. Does that make sense?
Yes, and they should be very similar if so general liability, yeah, is well, it's general, but it's also the forms that are used are very standard and they, across different industries. But if it's written correctly for an outfitter, it's contemplating that exposure. And I think some of your questions may be better for Crystal, but an outfitter operation, I think the ACA program comes into play more for like very specific events or like activity, like a specific activity for a like certain period of time, like a limited period of time, not an ongoing operation that you might see an outfitter daily, running trips or whatever.
So in other words, a typical example would be like a non-paddling situation where somebody gets a waiver for serving liquor at a special event, and it's tied to the event. It's a one-time type of coverage. Um, so that would be kind of analogous to an ACA event, one-time event where you're getting the per event coverage through the ACA platform, so to speak, as opposed to ongoing liability coverage.
No, I was thinking more of like a cleanup or a race or something like that. That's like a finite period of time versus running river trips all summer long, like where you need a policy that's specific for your entity that is covering your business operations, as opposed to buying an event through the ACA. And then
Yeah.
I wants to say
Well,
something.
wait, so may I please interject? We actually have a special program for outfitter livery and guides that
Okay.
is separate from anything we've talked about today.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
yeah,
Do you want to explain that, Beth?
so we, well, so out, exactly what Michael was saying, running an outfitter or livery or guide service that's an ongoing, that's a business and they're running the river, every day in rafts or kayaks or whatever. That is a separate program from our Paddle America Club insurance or our affiliate organization. That's just a whole different animal. And so, Mark, really, without knowing more about what coverages the person you're speaking with has and how much they're paying, it would be very difficult for us to offer any broad generalizations in terms of which program's better or worse. But that's a different animal than what we're talking about today.
Okay, so maybe I'll can follow up with Crystal on
Yeah.
that particular
Yeah,
point.
we'd be happy to have another call with you about that.
Absolutely.
So
Okay, so
typically our clubs, our Paddle America clubs have coverage for everything that they do during the season. If they
yep,
have a little river cleanup, if they have a little recreational paddle on Wednesday nights, if they have a little race on Sunday, around a buoy in a lake, they've got coverage for all of that. That's the broadest. That's the Paddle America Club.
yep.
For an
Okay,
affiliate organization, that actually occurred, the coverage is provided on an event by event basis. So we
yep.
have to know about each event for an affiliate, and that is not a club. It's,
No,
somebody.
I get it. I
Okay.
get it.
Yep.
Let me just move on to my second question then, which I know Crystal will be happy to field since there was a time where we worked on this a couple of years ago. But so I'm contemplating and working with this outfitter on offering what used to be called the paddle safety facilitator workshop offering. Now I believe it's called Smart Safety Smart program. The name is morphed. But so in that case, Crystal, correct me if I'm wrong. In working with that outfitter, I have the option to be covered under their insurance policy somehow, assuming that they have an ongoing liability policy coverage for their staff as well as their vendors and contractors, or I could purchase the $20 individual coverage as an ACA instructor for that specific program that I'm conducting for that third party. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct?
Yes, to both of those. You could either
Okay.
yeah, you could look into what their insurance policy covers if you could be covered that way, or absolutely as an instructor, you could request the insurance through the ACA for you to be covered as the instructor yourself during the course that you're holding for that organization. Absolutely.
If it's $20, I would do that.
Yeah, well, that's a benefit. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I just wanted to, I'm assuming that any employee or independent contractor who's doing a compensated project for an outfitter who had that general liability coverage would also be covered in that fashion. It's like extra coverage, if you will.
Yeah, you'd want to look into the independent contractor piece, but the employee for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
and for a contractor, that's sort of between them and the organization. They have to say,
Right. When I say contractor, it's like somebody like myself
yeah,
who is
well,
actually doing a
instructor.
program, who's not on staff,
Right,
which get a 1099, independent contractor compensation for delivering the workshop. But
right. I'm
okay,
just
so
saying it's sort of on you to work with the organization to understand what their responsibility is. I mean, or something to
yes,
think about.
yes, of
Okay,
course.
we
Okay,
have a few other
Chris,
questions.
thank you.
Yeah, Matt, go.
All right. A question for Beth regarding your recommendation or requirement for 2 or 3 paddlers at the same time. I'm just curious how that would apply to downriver race events that we see on the green race, if you're familiar with that,
Oh,
or the
yeah.
Russell Fort, or Upper Yacht, Golly, just to name a few, that are high level races and competitors race individually.
Oh,
But
yes. Right. But they're not really paddling alone. So,
oh,
yeah. No, we provide coverage for races like that day in, day out, big,
oh,
small.
I was
Yeah.
just curious about how that went. And then how would you view your coverage if someone was doing an event on the Rio Grande River that forms the border between the United States and Mexico?
Hmm.
Would ACA coverage apply in a
Um,
international transboundary drainage?
Now there's one we haven't heard before.
Just thought I'd
Yeah.
throw that
Well,
out.
or
But
the boundary waters, right? I mean,
yeah,
so yeah, I mean, we don't have any specific exclusions in our policy that would prohibit us from providing coverage.
okay. And then for Michael, in this session, I don't think we've heard a whole lot about waiver forms, and we rely on those quite a bit to kind of give us some form of protection. But how much do they actually stand up a good waiver form, very explicit waiver form? How well do they stand up? And what about online waiver forms when you don't actually have a real signature? Is that also standing up equivalent to a signed paper form?
Well, I think the last question is yes, but so I'm not a lawyer. I will say the ACA, I think, has waivers that they can supply, which is good. I think from an insurance perspective, the way we look at it is that it is a good risk management practice, but it does not eliminate the exposure. That you can be sued and you need to be defended. And while it may help reduce your liability in a suit, there's still a cost of defense. So like a nice to have good risk management practice, but doesn't eliminate the exposure.
And it varies at the state level. Uh, but again, Michael, we would completely agree with Michael. But we've warned and informed through the waiver process that gives us some defense. But whether, there was a horrible accident and they would stand up in court, it's highly dependent on what state your case is being heard in
And what happened?
and what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go to Matthew, are you good with your questions?
Oh, yes. Thanks a
Okay.
lot. That was great.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go through some of the comments because there's some really good comments, and I want to make sure folks, if they have questions, can have you experts answer them. Casey from Wood Pawcatuck, she just mentioned she's partnering with other organizations on paddling events and the topic of co-insured. So it sounds, Casey, like you're comfortable with how you're addressing this, and if not, please ask a question.
Yeah, I can clarify.
Yeah,
Can you hear me okay?
yeah.
We're what you've described it already, kind of like an organization that we don't necessarily do water-based events throughout the year, but we would like to do one or two. So we have a fiscal agent that handles all of our accounting for us and our federal grant. And we're approaching one of our events by asking the partner organization, who it maybe is an ACA org, I'm not really sure, if we should co-insure and have them sign us on as a protection. I'm wondering if you've come across that kind of setup before.
No. So can you explain the relationship with the organization? So
We just work in similar arenas. Like we're both working to protect the watershed, and we work in river restoration and protection.
And
yeah,
So
Casey,
they're
Wood
the
Pawc-
what they're we're the
this is a
Woodpawcatuck.
partnership. Sorry, this is a Wild Scenic River partnership. Wild Scenic Rivers.
We're a wild and yep, we're a wild and scenic river, and they are the Watershed Association.
All right. So in partnership, Wild and Scenic Rivers, Park Service helps manage. There's an organization that's made up of people in a council. One of the people in the council is the fiscal agent, is the only one who can get money and spend money on behalf of the group, but it can be a coalition. So Kelly was one of those groups.
but they're related in their mission and in their, do you have board members that are in common? So
We don't,
go ahead.
not necessarily. We have council members, and
But
we
the
have
council was
the
governed.
executive director that's on.
Yeah, council though is
Yeah,
governed
go
by
ahead.
bylaws. They have bylaws to define who's responsible fiscally for whatever happens with the organization.
So it's possible that you could be named under the same policies, but that's like a very specific underwriting question, and they look at like common ownership, common control. That's why I asked the board member question. So there's like a whole list of parameters that the underwriters are looking at to see if they can combine an entity under the same insurance policy or not. And some carriers might have slightly different requirements. I think for an event, I think it's more likely that it could be like if you were working together on a specific event. So, and this kind of goes back to one of Mark's questions too. Like a lot of groups will have or entities will have their, package insurance policies, their general liability and et cetera. But if they're holding events that fall outside of the scope of the policy, which often happens in the river space because, like a nonprofit that's basically doing white collar type activities can buy a relatively cheap insurance policy, general liability policy. But if they're also organizing bigger events, we'll do very specific event coverage. Like Matthew mentioned, the golly, like so they like the race might be covered under the ACA program, and the festival would be covered under a separate event policy because it's a lot of off-water activities that don't fall into the ACA program. If it's so, we might be able to include two entities in a specific event policy that where they're partnering on that event. But as far as just ongoing day-to-day operations, that's something that you'd have to work through with the underwriter.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you good for now, Casey? If you have other questions, you can get in touch with us
No,
later.
yeah, that's great.
Um,
Thank you.
I'm gonna I saw several comments from a few people who are working together. I don't know if they want to explain more. Jeffrey Gill and MJ Crandall, I see Coulter in there too. Jeffrey said, we're piloting a more direct on-water role with two local ranger districts who lost a significant portion of their river-specific staff last year, and my organization runs volunteer programs that would occasionally be a bit easier with an on-water portion.
Yeah, I want just to chime in. I think we've talked a lot about
Mhm.
events and these specific, like a cleanup or a stewardship day. And we have a few of those, but have sort of insurance sorted out for those. And we're starting to move into this organization due to a need from the land management agencies that we serve, where we do a little bit more on water as a program rather than as an event, like an ongoing thing throughout the season, specific staff, or ideally one day specific volunteers, but we're trying to kind of get this started slowly with the like more controlled internal um, groups so we could like vet better, honestly, and train better. So I was curious if you guys could offer anything about how programs might work. And then MJ, I think, had a comment, and Coulter had a comment in the chat too. They're two of the high ups in the forest around here, and they could probably chime in from the more management perspective.
That Beth, does that fall into your area, or are you?
Crystal, do you want to answer that? So the idea is that it's so Jeff, I guess or Jeffrey, you're not really a membership organization, but you have events throughout maybe the season.
Yes, FRA is a volunteer organization.
It's a
So we have
volunteer
two paid staff.
organization.
We're going to wind up having two fellows through the MCC program over the summer. But then otherwise, we have a board, but it's not like a paid membership or anything. There is like a voting element for the folks who serve on the board, but it's a nonprofit board. It's not like a paddling club or a like friends group. Our goal is to like motivate and direct volunteer action to help educate the public and serve the like river management purposes.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in because you mentioned MJ, who's a ranger, asked, would the ACA insurance coverage cover paid employees of the nonprofit organization?
So I feel like if it's a few events that you're having, a lot of times when I'm trying to break down, we've got the clubs like Beth was saying, which is really member based. And then the other one, the affiliate, another way I describe it a lot of times is event insurance. So if you're having it doesn't necessarily have to be an event, but if you're having a something going on where you're like, it's on the water, we need insurance for that, you can use the affiliate membership for that. You pay for the year. The annual membership is 125. And then as you need it, as things come up and you're like, hey, we need insurance for this event, you fill out an insurance request form and you pay $20 and you can have the general liability insurance specific to that event that you're holding. Does that help?
So for that definition, any day that we sent staff onto the water with the managing agencies, we would have to file that day as a specific like on water event, pay $20 for that day, and then we would be covered by ACA's coverage.
Yes, for that event itself. And you can request it. We typically ask for a few days notice when you're requesting it. So if you have those scheduled for the year, you can send me those requests as early on as you want. If they're all in October, you can request them in January. But yes, to answer your question simply, yes, that's exactly how you would do it.
So
What would the time frame be to get something like that submitted? Does it need to be in like a week in advance, a month in advance?
So I believe our website says 10 days. That gives us plenty of time
Okay.
to review. I have plenty of people that something pops up last minute, like, oh my gosh, this is coming up on Saturday and it's a Thursday. And I work as quickly as you do. So if you fill everything out and I get everything, I can get it to you same day. We just ask for that time frame in case we need to dig a little further into your request or I need to ask you questions or things like that. But I can move very quickly in getting you what you need.
Okay. What happens if that is a multi-day event?
Great
Like
question.
yeah, like the Spotted Bear Ranger District on the South Fork of the Flathead, that's a multi-day float with even more logistics on either side. Would that be one form? Would that be six forms if it wound up being 6 days?
So if it is considered one event itself, even if it's multi-day, you do not have to request it per day. It can be considered one event. I believe if it's over 3 days, I just have to get either Beth or my direct supervisor, Kelsey, to take a look at it and approve it. But no, you would not have to fill out a request form per
Mhm.
day.
Okay.
so my
If MJ or Coulter has anything to chime in, I'd be
Yeah,
curious
I
to
was going
hear
to
if they
ask
have thoughts
Coulter.
on that.
Coulter says, I'm curious to see about how the ACA coverage is part of your operation. Not sure what that means, Coulter, because it's all
Yeah,
affiliated.
I guess, I mean, for us, I mean, so volunteers from Flathead Rivers Alliance would generally be covered under a volunteer agreement with the Forest Service, and then would be um uh they would be they would be covered as federal employees as long as they're under a volunteer agreement. Now um for FRA staff, the question really is around workman's comp, right? The general, I think it sounds like ACA is limited to general liability. So the question we're trying to get at is workman's comp and how that works
for your employees,
for FRA's employees.
volunteer, not, well, that you're placing within the Forest Service program to provide work that's not being done. Is that, are we?
Yeah, they may, I mean, within our partnership agreement, we, the partner organization may, excuse me, the partnership organization may be doing some work under that agreement, but we don't cover workman's comp for the organization's employees.
Like, I think an example is that the staff of the partner organization would go out for the day and gather some river data on the river. We're not we're collaborating on the work, but we're not picking them up as a volunteer for the day because there are staff of another organization. How could they pick up workman's comp so that they are covered in case there's an accident while they're gathering data on the national forest for that day?
And
Yes.
Coulter, you're not paying them.
No, we're not. They are being
Right.
paid by their other organization. And I just want to make clear, the challenge cost share agreement that we have with the partner means we can't pick them up as a volunteer. So yeah, they got to stand on their own in terms of this question.
No, so the workers' compensation is it's a statutory requirement. So if they are employees of an organization and they're working, they're covered by workers' comp. So that follows them as long as they're doing work for their employer. I think where it could get tricky, and it's not a coverage concern, because if they're listed, you don't even list them by name. If they're an employee and their payroll is listed on the workers' comp, there is coverage. But if they're performing activities outside, so let's say their job is clerical, working at a desk and a computer, and now they're out doing river cleanup work, that's not going to jeopardize coverage, but it could mean that they're being misclassified and it could significantly increase the cost of the workers' comp. So the way the workers' comp carriers look at it is whatever the riskiest portion of your job is, that's where we're going to code you. So you work, every day of every week of the year behind a computer, but 1 week of the year you're, driving, your job is driving around. Well, they're going to code you in that workers' comp code for the driving exposure. And so that's the tricky part, and it's not a coverage issue. So I wouldn't be worried about coverage, but either if you're reporting or an auditor's picking up the fact that they're doing river cleanup work when they're being charged for a clerical code, that could result in an additional expense. And also the way workers' comp works, it's retroactive to the policy year. So if that's picked up at audit, so you come to the end of your policy year and this activity is picked up after the policy is expired, they'll go back and charge for that exposure for the year. Does that help?
Yeah, I think what the issue is, and kind of where we've come and advocating for some discussion on this, is that workers' comp for river activities is seemingly very expensive, and maybe cost prohibitive for small organizations with just a couple of employees who may be doing this occasionally. And I'm also hearing this in the trails side of trails organizations. Smaller trails organizations are also having issues there.
Mhm.
And so wanting to bring the discussion a little bit broader, is there something we're missing here? And what are there ways to make it viable for a small organization to have a couple of paid employees who do most of their work coordinating, but need to get out on the river to accomplish their mission?
Yeah, no. It's the workers' comp again, workers' comp is very statutory, and it's a requirement. So you have to have it if you have employees, and if they're out on the river, whether you report it or not. So there are some, small nonprofits that try to separate the river activities from what their general mission is and their primary core activities. And it's sort of like an ancillary thing that it just, their employees aren't being asked to do it. They're just kind of doing it on their own time, sort of, off the record type thing. And you might be able to get away with that. Again, as long as you're listing the state and the payroll, you're not going to run into a coverage issue, but it can be picked up at audit, and you will get charged for it. And so that can be risky for a small organization, because you're going along and paying, 12 cents per $100, and then all of a sudden it's $5 per 100. And so, but the cleanest way to do it is what you don't want, is what you're concerned about, which is making sure you're listing the correct code, and then the cost can be prohibitive.
Mhm. Matt, if you could, okay, MJ, we're gonna go on because we're getting a little short on time and we have several questions. So I'm gonna go to folks who have not been heard yet. And I'm gonna pose two questions that are from two different people, but just so that I quit talking. Larry Freilich, Inyo County, California. We're interested in insurance as it relates to our river and trail stewardship group, specifically the county's indemnification requirements from the landowner, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and whether a bond might be an appropriate vehicle to address that. Let's just do that, and then I'll get to Matt, your question in a second. I don't even understand the question, so Matt, you can probably.
I don't think so, Bond. I don't think that fits here, but I would need to know a lot more about it, and I'd be happy to chat
Okay.
offline.
Okay. Thank you. So that was an interesting question. Matt says he got his question answered. Let's see. Francis, we got you, I think. And Jake says, can ACA coverage be used for creek stomping events or um, volunteer-based events involving the public near and in creeks, streams? So this is sort of like what you mentioned, Beth. You're not boating, you're kind of wandering around in ankle-deep water. So you go ahead, but I think the answer is yes.
Yes, the answer is yes for that.
Mm-hmm. Eric, does ACA PAC insurance cover river maintenance activities, removing log jams, chainsaws, and motorized pulleys?
Not on purpose. So Crystal, I know we talked a lot about this last year with the watersheds. Do you remember where we ended up with the chainsaw situation?
I don't. I feel like
Yeah, we would
I
have.
could certainly look into that again. Because that would throw another, I mean, that's liability. It would just throw
Yes.
another dangerous liability into it. But I can look into it. I'd be happy to get back to whoever's question that is, if they'd like to email me.
That's a good question.
It's really not the intention of our insurance if that happened and there was a claim. I can't, we had a big, long discussion about this last year. So let us get back to you on that one.
Mm-hmm. At RMS, we've held using chainsaws to remove woody debris workshops that are extensive, and the certification allows you to, claim that, and it helps on your insurance. But that would be more like a regular insurance thing because that's intense. While we have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to get let Matt speak. But before you leave, we have a little survey. We would love to have you respond to give us some feedback on how we did with our program today. And then Matt, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Oh yeah, just a real quick follow-up to Jeff's question about multi-days. And say you fill out all the paperwork, hand it to Crystal, and then a huge storm event hits, the river comes up to flood stage, and you have to cancel and postpone a couple days. What happens then?
That is a great question. I get that a lot actually, because we can't control the weather. Email me. Hey, we weren't able to have this event. It's going to be exactly the same place. We're doing exactly the same thing. The dates are just changing. And I can just reissue you another certificate. It's super, or even if it's months down the road, you're like, hey, we need to reschedule it and we're not sure when. I will hang on to whatever you've paid. And when the time comes back up again, just let me know. And we might need to fill out another form if any other information has changed. But I'm super flexible in making sure that you get to use your money towards what you want to use it towards. It won't go to the wayside.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Sometimes I know when my race that I run we cite a postponement date. So, and we've hardly ever had to use it, but when we did, it was there. It was really easy for everybody to rejigger the schedule. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to just go to a couple of final slides. Thank you. I should have put Crystal in there, but so thank you, Crystal, for joining us also. And we'll provide everybody's info if you have follow-up questions. Mike may or may not want to answer them. No, he will. And then Beth and Crystal also. And back to RMS, we have a YouTube channel with over 300 educational and sharing videos about river management. Would love to have you just check that out. And then here are just a few of the upcoming events. They are some of them as exciting as insurance, talking about aquatic invasive species at hydropower facilities. And then we have a whole bunch of wild and scenic rivers webinars coming up. And if you go to the RMS site, there's a calendar. So there are lots of things going on in the next couple of months for sure. So thank you so much for attending. Want to be able to give you your half of your day back, a few hours of your day back. Please fill out the survey. We'll post a video, the recording of this on our river training channel, and send a copy to you. So Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you again, Crystal and Beth and Mike.